Hello, everybody. Today we are going to discuss the post colonial state in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The post colonial state is a very important state. Why? Because we have come out from the clutches of the power of a colonial power, and we are coming to our own as a country which has sovereignty. uh, we will try to understand what are the meanings of being a colony, and what is the meaning and what are the responsibilities which come while being an independent country. The journey from freeing ourselves from a colonial power, from being a colony to a state, are is a struggle which in which many people lose their lives. Many people sacrifice themselves. They sacrifice the prime of their life by staying in prisons, by being thrown into dungeons. But the whole journey leads us to being an independent country where we can call the shots, where the people of the country can frame their own constitution, where they can choose their leaders and run the country according to their own aspirations and expectations. Now, now, in this module, we are going to discuss the post colonial state. What are the challenges which these post colonial states face in Asia, Africa, and Latin America? How successful they are in facing these challenges? What are the hindrances in the way of development? And how are the leaders and the masses overcoming these challenges to prove that they can run a country on their own. Now, what is a state? What is a state? Any area that has population, a fixed territory, government, and sovereignty. Sovereignty is both internal and external. Uh, Whichever territory has these four components is termed as a state: population, fixed territory, government, organized government, and sovereignty. Sovereignty is freedom. Having your sovereignty means having both internal and external freedom to decide what you want, to frame your policies. When a government does not take orders from anybody within its boundaries or from outside its boundaries, that means you have got sovereignty. Now, the modern nation state emerged after the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. The modern state arose when feudalism, the feudal age broke down. There was a decrease in the papal authority and decline in the belief of the divine right of kings. Now, there are many theories talking about the origin of state. One of them is the divine right of kings, which says that the king is the representative of God on earth. He has got blue blood flowing in his veins. That is why you cannot oppose the king, you cannot criticize the king, you cannot remove the king. Now, this theory, the divine right of kings, troubled the people of Europe for a long, long time. The church and the king came together to exploit the people and maintain a hold on them for many, many centuries. So, with the modern state arose because of education, awareness, and because of democracy, and because of the slogan of liberty, equality, fraternity. The hold of the kings, the hold of the church declined. One of the beneficiaries in some of these countries were the barons, the landlords, who were also in connivance with the king and the church to exploit the masses. All this, the feudal age, the feudalism, the papal authority, that is the control of the church, and the control of the kings weakened, which led to the emergence of the modern state. We can also state that because of the awareness among the people and because of the rise of the state, there was a decrease in the feudalism, decrease in the authority of the church, and decline in the belief of the divine right of kings. So they all these factors work together for the emergence of the modern state. Uh, and the state evolved from a warfare state to a welfare state, a state bordering or surviving on wars that was brushed aside by the people, and the idea of a welfare state in which the state works for the benefit of the people came to the forefront. And you had, and till today, the welfare state is has caught the welfare state has caught the fancy of the people and continues to find a special place in the hearts of the masses. The protest was for dignity, for respect, for self respect. And this could be heralded only by democracy, by ushering in democracy into the countries. Now, in the first wave in Latin America, in the Portuguese and Spanish territories, this wave was ushered in which the indigenous population was not eliminated, neither were they absorbed. There was inequality practiced. There was a constitution, but it was never implemented. The indigenous population were not included in the race for development, but they started protesting for equality and for justice. The time from 1750 to 1914 in Latin America is known as an age of revolutions, in which many people uh, came together of different countries. They came together in their respective countries to fight for the independence. So, a momentous age for the people of Latin America, where they asked for independence from the colonial power and decided to evolve as a country, as an independent country. The second wave afflicted Europe and the Middle East, which came after and this age came after the First World War. Uh, the Austro-Hungarian uh, Empire collapsed, so did the Russian Empire, and so did the Ottoman Empire. They all crumbled, they all collapsed, and there was a failure of emergence of strong countries, which led to the rise of fascism and communism in fascism in Germany and communism in Russia, which led to new permutations and combinations, which ultimately culminated in the Second World War. So, the second wave, in which the people demanded freedom from the church, from the kings, led to new upheavals in Europe. The third wave is the wave which touched us in Asia. In countries in Asia, we have India, Philippines, who asked for their freedom. We had countries in Africa which were asking for freedom, which demanded freedom. The Caribbeans, countries in Caribbean which asked for independence, like Barbados and Trinidad, and Middle East countries like Israel and Jordan, which asked for freedom from the colonial power. The fourth wave is a recent phenomena of the last century, the last decades of the last century, in which there was a collapse of the giant USSR into 15 republics: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, all these countries. USSR, a giant communist leader, broke down into 15 republics. Mikhail Gorbachev introduced perestroika and glasnost in the Russian political system, in which he welcomed criticism of the Communist Party. The criticism came in such a flood that it just washed away the remains of the Communist Party, and USSR broke down into 15 republics. The successor state of USSR was Russia, which grappled with its own problems for many, many years, till recently, when it is again emerging as a power under the leadership of Putin. Now, besides that, the basic one of the other main events during that time was when communism collapsed in USSR. It also led to a collapse of the many regimes in Eastern Europe which it was supporting. So you had a breakdown of collapse of or breakdown of communism in most of the Eastern Europe, which was red once upon a time, red being the color of the communists. So Romania, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, all the communist government in all these uh, countries collapsed like a house of cards. So the fourth wave made the world, which was a bipolar world, it was made into a unipolar world with America all in all till the European Union came in. The fourth wave talked about each and every country asking for freedom, asking for their for asking for rights to change or to decide their own destiny. The features of a colonial state are something which we have read since beginning. A colonial state is has institutions imposed on it from the colonial power. The culture of the indigenous people, the people, the local people, is looked down upon. So much so that there are efforts to replace the culture of the indigenous people. The whites or the colonial power consider the culture, the living style of the natives or the blacks or the browns, as we were called, as uncivilized, and the whites take upon themselves the onerous task of teaching the native population how to live, how to eat, how to dress up, and they call it the white man's burden. For example, the Hindu civilization boasts of a very rich past. We dressed in loose clothes, in a dhoti, for example, because that is how, or in a sari, because that is what the climate demands of us. We sat on the floors and ate food because as we've seen, it leads to a lot of exercise. The Guru Shishya Parampara, a very healthy institution, was considered as barbaric by the Britishers, who replaced it with their own schools, in which attendance, fee structure, books, and learning in a foreign language, that is English, which has now become a global language, is what we were taught. So the Guru Shishya Parampara was eliminated because it was not considered good enough by the Westerners, though it suited our purpose. So the people who boasted, the Indians, for examples, who boasted of a very rich civilization, were told that they were uncivilized, or they were barbaric, or they did not know how to live. So the attack on culture was massive, which led to a shake-up of the entire society of Asia. Another very interesting example, but very unfortunate example, is of the Vietnam society. It's not only the British who did it, the French also attacked the culture of the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese traditionally supported long hair, that is their tradition, but they opened up schools. And you could enter the schools only wearing Western clothes and by cutting your hair. So these kind of attacks on the culture of the native population were a feature, a hallmark, a great work of for themselves, a great work termed by the colonial rulers themselves, which we thought was attacking our culture, was the kind of work they did to demean us and our culture vis-a-vis when they compared it with their own. So, every society has its own challenges, its own problems, its own prejudices, which have to be slowly eliminated, or which have to be worked upon with the passage of time, by the help of education, awareness, media, technology, so on and so forth. Now, the post colonial state in Latin America uh, became a state which was dominated by a few local elites who had vested interests. These vested interests did not want that the masses should benefit. They wanted a divide between the haves and the have nots. They wanted the divide to continue. They wanted the gap between the rich and the poor because they were rich. They wanted the gap between the rich and the poor, if not grow, at least remain what it was. These local elites had benefited a lot by hobnobbing with the colonial power. So they wanted to keep these or retain these benefits with themselves. Latin America had a very strange phenomena, that is of rise of caudelos. Caudelos were people who were hired by the or they emerged or they evolved because of the support of the leaders at the helm of affairs. The leaders who usually came up through elections were overpowered and overthrown by a coup, which was led by a charismatic leader backed by the military. If the military kept a firm control on the people through their various arms, through various acts, it suited the authoritarian, the dictator who was in power, and it suited the military also. Whenever, but because of all this, there was a lot of political instability among the societies, and the state had to face the problem of political instability. Now, in Latin America, you had these small military commanders who were the who rose because of this situation and continued to rule so. They had pockets of they were they commanded respect and power in pockets, in certain pockets, and through these caudelos the people at the helm of affairs commanded respect of that constituency or people of that area. The control of the church in these societies was firm, it was total. The church also played a major role in deciding who would be in power, who would retain power, how much, to what extent. Besides this, there was interference in Latin America of the foreign powers, that is the US, UK, who wanted to continue having a share in the resources with which they could fill their own coffers. Besides this, the leaders in these countries were inexperienced. They were not. They did not know the task of state building. Lack of experience marred the efficiency of the system. There was in Latin America there was political disunity among the people themselves. The society was divided between the conservatives and the liberals. The conservatives wanted the old order to stay, while the liberals wanted to usher in a free market and the concept of liberty, equality, justice, and democracy, which is the hallmark of a good state these days. Plus, the military refused to go back to its barracks. It is often said that it is very easy to call the military on the roads, but it is very difficult to send the army back into the barracks because once the soldiers have tasted power, they do not want to go back. The case, and this is true for, you can see it in Pakistan, you can see it in Sri Lanka, in the past, in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, that in Latin America, the army wanted to continue to play a very, very important active role in the civil administration. The post colonial state in Africa also had its own set of problems. The sale of heritage continued unabated in Africa. The military was very active in a few countries because a few dictators came to power. The election process was hijacked. The civil administration was brushed aside. Apartheid continued to strike at the people's dignity and self-respect. It continued to suppress, apartheid continued to suppress a majority of the people who were treated brutally in their own home, in their own country. They were denied freedom of speech, expression, freedom to form association, freedom to move freely, freedom to criticize the government. So in Africa, also, except a group of people who benefited by staying in power, to whom the reins of power had been handed by the colonial power, except those, the masses, the majority of the people continued to wallow in poverty, illiteracy, living in slums, living in ghettos. The leaders who were who were new were not experienced, and those who were experienced became petty, selfish, and did not want a new thought, a new line of thought to be implemented, a no new thought to be practiced and to be implemented. They were very happy in their own cocoon where they could reap the maximum dividends, the maximum profits. Now, Africa is a multi ethnic society. And in that society, in which people were living according to their own traditions and according to their own culture, boundaries were created not by themselves but by colonial powers who did not understand the meaning of land, what meaning what land had what was the meaning of the word land for the tribe, how precious it was for them, how they derived livelihood from it, how they the land and the people went back centuries, having a common history, suffering together because of a famine, flood, a plague. The people and the land's identity merged into one. The people drew their livelihood from the land, hunting, fruit gathering, farming. All of the African people, the people of various tribes, drew their livelihood from the land, and the land was a larger than life figure for them. It did not end the land's history did not end with a individual's life. It continued for generations. So all this was fragmented by the new boundaries which the colonial power had made on its own whims and fancies. The economies of the African societies are very, very weak. They are not mature. They lack the basic infrastructure. They lack rational planning. So the economies are very weak. And all this is compounded with the fact that there is a lack of educated, alert citizens who do not know what damage is being done by the interference of foreign powers and by the few vested interests within their own tribe, within their own country. Now, the lack of informed citizens, the lack of aware citizens is only halting the process of development in the African societies. And the role being played by the African states is not very mature, is not very consistent, is not very uniform, and is not rational at all. The post colonial Asian state has a Herculean task because the dynasty rule by a few families, is a very big curse in most of the Asian states. There's a lot of corruption, red tapeism, nepotism. The corruption is rampant. No part of the society is has been untouched by corruption. The regional conflicts in countries like India and Pakistan are an example which embarrass the people. Besides embarrassing the people, it is a deterrent to the development of a country. People fight over resources, people fight over language. The divide between people of different region is so stark that it is humiliating at times to be a citizen of a country in which people fight not for education, not for equality, not for liberty, but for petty issues which divide them, and those issues are region, religion, caste, class, gender, and so on. The political structures are very, very weak. We can see how the parliament functions in India, where no work is done. The ruling party sometimes wants to work, but the opposition, which does not believe in constructive criticism, rather it believes in destructive criticism. The whole economy, the whole political system is hijacked, is held to ransom by a few people, and that too in the most prestigious political institution, that is the legislature. The law-making body where there should be discussion, deliberation, and debate. We have people throwing mics at each other, the representatives of the people throwing mics at each other, abusing each other. No law is made. The time of the parliament is wasted, and what do we have? We witness infighting among the people, among the representatives of the people. No concrete work is done. Rather, work is suspended for many, many hours at the cost of state exchequer. Not only that, there is a tussle for power or tussle for supremacy between the judiciary, legislature, and executive, especially among the judiciary and the parliament in India. For example, whenever the judiciary gives a judgment, the parliament criticizes it that by saying that the judges do not have the authority because they are not elected by the people. They are not the representatives of the people. The Supreme Court, the apex body, on the other hand, says that when the parliament does not do what it has to do, it is not making laws, somebody has to step in, and that is the judiciary. So the judiciary has kept itself above board and is delivering whatever in whatever capacity it is to the people, and the people are happy with the pronouncement, with the judgment of the apex body. So there is the political structures in countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and in countries like Africa is very weak. The formal institutions have to be strengthened, they have to be respected so that they are more efficient and they can churn out work more efficiently and more responsibly. The other problem is nepotism, and in countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and in African countries, we have the military, which is too much interested in the affairs in the civil administration. Money and muscle power is used liberally. It has to be stopped. They are the curses of the political system of any country because they halt the election process, or they are and they attack the transparency of the election process. In Asian and African societies, there are too many vociferous elements which want to wreck the political system at any cost, which is not very healthy, which also leads to economic development slowing down and becoming a very, very slow process, while the patience of the people runs thin and the people get frustrated with the political system. To summarize, we can say that elites, the local elites or the elites now have to play a very, very constructive role. They have to learn to share, they have to learn to pull up the masses to a higher level. The idea of a welfare state has to be taken very, very seriously. It has to be taken out from the paper and put practically on the ground. The government has to be very, very responsible. It has to stop thinking about vote banks and think about the country as a whole. The media should forget about its TRPs, about its ratings, and should play a very important role, a very unbiased role, taking information to the people and from the people, feedback back to the government so that we can come across with new policies. The opposition in all these countries should not just aspire for power, rather, they should play a very constructive role when it comes to criticizing or cooperating with the government. To conclude, we can say that the post colonial state faces many challenges. It faces the challenge of violence, of political violence, which leads to dictators coming to power and more military coups, which go against the very spirit of democracy. The post colonial state is facing the problem of poverty, which needs to be quickly eliminated, otherwise, the people will lose their cool. It faces the problem of corruption, which has sunk into each and every level of our society and which is troubling the common people. The post colonial state is facing the problem of not being able to take criticism very well and very positively. So there's a lot of oppression of the dissidents. The dissidents are put into jails. They are tortured. Their freedom of speech and expression is taken away. They have to leave the country and settle in some other country so that they can give vent to their grievances and vent of grievances of the people. All this has to be taken by the horns by the post colonial state to evolve itself into a mature and a responsible state. Thank you.